Welcome into the 21st and final episode of Season 3 of the Educational Duct Tape podcast. Today, I've got a bunch of EdTech wisdom coming from show listeners. You'll hear about whether it's better to have a big tech toolbox or a small one. You'll hear about Pear Deck, Mentimeter, Flipgrid, and more tools. You'll hear about nacho paragraphs and media literacy. You'll find out a trick for removing pages from PDFs, and you'll hear so much more, including some sneak peeks into my new book. And at the end of the episode, you'll also hear the crown jewel of the season, the Giggle Mix. Let's get started.
Hey, I'm Gretchen Bridgers of the Always a Lessons Empowering Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape podcast with Jake Miller.
Welcome in, Duct Tapers. I hope you can hear me okay right now. I am kind of half talking, half whispering because I'm recording this from in a hotel room, and hopefully the people in the rooms next to me are not completely irritated with me at this very moment. If you hear a knock on the door, that's what it is. If you can hear me through the wall, by all means, come on over and knock on the door and yell at me. I am coming to you from... where am I at? Easton, Pennsylvania. I'm in Easton, Pennsylvania to speak tomorrow to the teachers at Phillipsburg School District in New Jersey, right across the river from here, right across the state border from here, tomorrow morning. And I figured, why not knock out this recording tonight while I'm in here? But hopefully the other tenants in the Lafayette Inn aren't hearing me talking right now and are completely annoyed with me. Or they're duct tapers themselves, and they think they're listening to somebody else listening to an episode they haven't heard yet. Somebody's probably walking down the hallway to come knock on my door right now. I will leave the mic on if somebody yells at me. So stay tuned to see if somebody knocks on the door to yell at me. I should probably introduce myself to you guys, just in case this is your first time listening. Let me get to that before I get to more of my nonsense. My name is Jake. I am here today to talk to you about duct tape and educational technology, and how I think the two things can go together to form an EdTech Integration Mindset, and also a silly metaphor that I think you could use in your classrooms this coming school year. For those of you who haven't quite started yet, I know I got about a week and a half left before I go back into my classroom. I hope that you're in the same spot and have a little more time off before you go back. But if you're in, then it can help you tomorrow in your class, and if you're not yet, it'll help you in a few weeks in your class. But I think this mindset can help you out. And today is the episode where I turn the microphone for a good chunk of the episode over to listeners to the show. So listeners had the opportunity, the duct tapers, as I call them here, had the opportunity to leave me a message on Flipgrid or on SpeakPipe and share a takeaway from this past season. Maybe it was a favorite soapbox moment that I did during the show. Maybe it was something that made them laugh during the show. Maybe it was a certain tech tool that they learned about from the show. Or maybe it was something they did in their classroom, maybe because of the show, and they're super proud of it, and we want to celebrate them. So I opened that up back in May or so for people to do that. You can call in to the SpeakPipe or the Flipgrid whenever you want to. The links are in the show notes, and leave me a message. It obviously won't be in this episode because I can't time travel, but I would love to feature your voice in a future episode. So click those links in the show notes to do that. So yeah, we're going to be hearing from 8 or 9, I think, different listeners during this episode. I'm kind of putting it together as I record it. So I think it's 8 or 9 different listeners who recorded some really awesome takeaways from this past season. Some of them will teach you new tech tips. Some of them might point you to look back at certain episodes. And some of them I found pretty stinking inspiring. So I think you might leave inspired after you listen to this too. Also in this episode, towards the end of the episode, I'm going to share one of my favorite things I do in this podcast, which is the Giggle Mix. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, some of them educational, some of them not. But in the educational ones, I think it's fair to say that we laugh and have more fun in this show than in the majority of those other shows. Now, there are some other ones that have quite a bit of giggling and goofiness, like the Partial Credit podcast, which is also on the Education Podcast Network. But we are up there for sure in the gigglingest podcasts in educational technology space. And so in the Giggle Mix at the end of this episode, I have mashed together all of the funny moments from this season for you to listen to and laugh at. Now, I should point out that this season actually ended, kind of 2.5 or 3 months ago at the end of the school year, but I've just been so stinking busy that I am just now at the beginning of August getting to recording this episode. I'm sorry for the delay, but I hope that listening to this maybe a couple months later than expected will tune you back into the past season and make you reminisce over some of the fun we had. There are some things that definitely made me laugh when editing that Giggle Mix, and I hope that you enjoy it when you hear it. Now, before we get into it, I do want to point out that the reason I've been so busy this summer and haven't gotten these episodes to you sooner is partially because I'm a father of 3 and my wife loves to go on adventures and on vacations and things like that. So I spend a lot of time being a family man and a dad. But I also, when I get those times to do some work, I haven't had a lot of time to direct to the podcast because I've been directing it towards my book, Educational Duct Tape and EdTech Integration Mindset. Now, to be honest, I thought that it would be out before this episode came out in August. Actually, I thought it would be out before this episode came out back in June when it was due, but books take a long time. And it took a long time this summer. It should be coming out within the next few weeks. I think by the end of August, you'll have a chance to get it into your hands. I'm really hoping that within a week from when this podcast comes out, you'll have the ability to order it. But we'll see. Whenever it comes out, I can tell you that I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited about it. And I can't wait to hear what you think of it. Whether it comes out on August 12th or August 19th or August 21st or August 31st. Is there an August 31st? Is that even a thing? Or whatever. Whenever it comes out, I'm going to be proud of it, and I can't wait to hear what you think of it. And in this episode, I will also share some sneak peeks with you about that book. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think of it, and I'll share a couple of little things to kind of whet your appetite for it during this episode. But before we do that, before we get to there, let's start featuring the duct tapers. So if you've never heard me use that term before, a duct taper is a listener to this very podcast, to the Educational Duct Tape podcast. They are a person who believes that educational technology is at its best when we use it as a tool to solve problems or meet goals in our classroom rather than as the goal and the focus of what we're doing. Just like duct tape, we don't set forth to use duct tape. We see duct tape as a tool that helps us meet goals. So a duct taper is a person that listens to this show and believes in that mindset. And this is the duct taper's chance to share some of the things that they learned and did and thought and experienced this year in relation to the podcast. By the way, do you notice nobody's knocked on my door yet? If the neighbors are angry at me, they're doing so very quietly. I'm recording at dinner time, so I'm thinking maybe they're all out to dinner at some fancy restaurant here in Easton, Pennsylvania. I don't know what the fancy restaurant is yet, but they're there, and I am recording, and I'm recording at a lower volume than I normally do, and nobody's nearby me. Who knows? Or they're all just grumbling and rolling their eyes at me right now because I could hear everything I say. I don't know. Let's get to the duct tapers. First up, we've got Mark Gasaway, who's going to share his reflections on one of my favorite soapbox moments this season. It came during the Kasey Bell episode. He's not taking the bait on my goofy beginning of the episode or beginning of the soapbox talk about the kid on my school bus, but Mark is talking about a student of the same name as the fictional character on my school bus. Take it away, Mark.
Hey, Jake. This is Mark, and I just wanted to say I was listening to the episode with Kasey Bell, and your talking point of TIMTWODI, and I just want to let you know I am going to enroll him in my classes next year, and I'm going to look for him amongst my students, and when we can't find him, I'm going to tell him there is more than one way to do this, and we're going to find that student. So can't wait to use it next year with my students. Thanks. Great tip and great episode.
All right, thank you for that, Mark. It's a fun idea. I do hope that you don't get in any trouble when you can't find TIMTWODI during a fire drill at school, though. I imagine you looking for students and reporting him absent to the office and them panicking and calling parents, not able to track down TIMTWODI's parents. This maybe is not a great idea, Mark. This is making me a little bit nervous as a parent, as an educator. Maybe not a great idea, but I do appreciate the message. I appreciate that you see the value in TIMTWODI. For those of you who haven't heard it, I talked about it in the Kasey Bell episode, which I'll put a link to in the show notes. And it's the acronym TIMTWODI. There is more than one way to do it. There is more than one way to do it. TIMTWODI, meaning there's not always one educational technology tool that works in every situation. There's not always one way of using that educational technology tool. There are multiple ways to do it. And we should feel empowered to do whatever is best for us in our classroom, with our content, with our style, with our students, with whatever we need to do. There is more than one way to do it. Next up, we have another duct taper sharing. This is my friend Jay Strumwasser, who I had the honor of meeting back at my very first ISTE, my very first and my only ISTE, because the other ISTEs, plural, have gone virtual since then. But I met Jay at one of the Philly cheesesteak places in Philadelphia. I don't remember the name. Pat's? Geno's? I don't know. I think it was Pat's, maybe. It was good. Actually, I didn't eat it. I ended up eating at the place across the street. But I met Jay. Jay was nice. And here's Jay's thoughts on a conversation I had recently with Sam Kary. Take it away, Jay.
Hey, Jake. Jay Strumwasser from New York. EdTech Jay on all social. I wanted to make a comment about Sam Kary's statement regarding the idea of students learning too much, or I guess he was in support of students supposed to learn too much, and I agree. I think that ultimately our students need a toolbox from which they can pull the quote-unquote duct tape that solves all problems to the hammer that can solve certain problems. So I figured that was the best part that I could add for your finale, and I hope that you are well and continue to do so. Talk to you soon. Or I guess I'll be listening to you soon. Bye-bye.
Well, Jay, I've got a surprise for you. You are speaking to me because you spoke, and now I'm responding. And you said you'd be listening to me, so hopefully you're listening right now. And I just listened to you, and hopefully everybody else listened to you, because that was some great insights there. I will say I'm on your side, albeit with a very mindful, deliberate integration of those tools. I think a toolbox full of tech tools that you don't know how to use is worthless, while one packed slightly lighter with tools that you can wield with great expertise is incredibly powerful. So I think there's a difference between having, just a hammer, as you said in your message there, and having a toolbox that you can't carry around because it's too heavy and you don't know how to use most of the tools in there. If you have somewhere in the middle where you're maybe not an expert, but proficient at all of the tools that are in there, or at least know when to use all the tools that are in there, I think that's obviously better than just using the hammer, and better than using too many things for you to keep up with. And so I believe in scaffolding tech tools into the classrooms. I don't think it has to be planned months or years in advance, like telling the staff, like in first grade, you get to use this. In third grade, we start using this tool. We don't start using this until fifth grade, and really scaffolding in that way. I don't think we need to do that. I mean, I think that would be cool if that worked. But the problem with that is that 5 years down the line, when that kid's in 10th grade, like the tech tool landscape is going to be totally different. So you can't even bother laying it out like that. It just won't work. But also, I think that it's more important, not to think of it in a planning way, but to think of it in an educational duct tape way, which is to add one tool at a time. Okay, not a whole toolbox at once, but one tool to the toolbox at a time, as those tools become valid, goal-addressing, problem-solving tools. So your literal actual toolbox in your garage or your basement, you're not just going to put hundreds of tools in there for when you need them. You're going to add tools to that as you learn how to use them, as they become useful in your house. You might have certain things you already know how to use from maybe your childhood or when you were a young adult, like a hammer and a drill and a screwdriver and a couple of other basic things. And then new tools get added one or two at a time as you have a purpose for them. We don't just pile them all in there. And I think that idea is perfect for in our classrooms too. We add in the tools that make sense when they make sense, and that leads to a robust, useful toolbox. I'd love to hear what you think, Jay, see if you agree, and maybe I should flag Sam, who's awesome, by the way, and see what Sam thinks of this too. I bet that Sam would agree. By the way, I'll link to that episode where Sam and I talked about that in the show notes. Sam is the dude behind the new EdTech Classroom YouTube videos, which are just phenomenal. So if you need some YouTube videos to learn how to use tech tools, I do recommend looking that way. Okay, before we move on to our next duct taper message, I want to share a little bit about my upcoming calendar. It's a little bit different from what it normally would be because school is about to ramp up and I'm about to head back into my classroom as an 8th grade science teacher, which means there won't be any traveling in my future, and there will also not be very many virtual events in my future because school days I'm at school. So, but there are some things that I could share now. As I mentioned, tomorrow I will be at Phillipsburg School District. Now, it's tomorrow as I'm recording this. It might be today as you're listening to this, or it might even be a couple days ago as you're listening to this. I don't know exactly when this will come out, and I don't know when you'll listen to this, but at some point in the space-time continuum, I will be at Phillipsburg High School in New Jersey. Next week, I will be at I will virtually be doing a keynote for Sayre schools in Oklahoma. And then that's all that's a scheduled event that's on my calendar right now. There are 4 other things that you can mark down as ways to hear me or other people who provide some great professional development. One is the Teach with Tech conference at twtcon.com. It's technically, I think, the live quote-unquote dates of it, the dates that they roll the videos out is over, but you can still pay to be able to access those videos. And one of those videos is a session I did, and there are other amazing ones in there. So that's a great thing to check out. Also, similarly, I did a conference for the Cypress Fairbanks School District down in Texas virtually a couple weeks ago. It is over as well, but those events are on YouTube, I believe, and I believe they're leaving them up there for people to see, so you could check that out. Link is in the show notes. I did a few sessions for them, and you could check them out from that link there. Also, a few days ago, as I'm recording this, was the SPARCC conference here in Ohio. It was virtual this year. I recorded a session for it, and that session is staying up and available through, I believe, October 31st. So even though the conference is technically over, that session and other amazing sessions at the SPARCC conference, you got to see that lineup. It's amazing. Those are also still available. So that link is in the show notes. And finally, at the end of September, I think it's the 24th to the 28th of September, Kasey Bell and her team at Shake Up Learning are doing a virtual back to school conference, which I'm honored to be one of the speakers for. That's coming up at the end of September. That is also free as long as you watch the videos during the first week that they air. And a link for that is in the show notes. Okay, so that's my upcoming calendar. I'll share a little more about some other stuff like the book in a little bit, but let's dive back into some more feedback from the Duct Tapers. I'm going to jump over to one of my favorite people to get a message from, and that is our friend Judy Dawson. Judy left a message, at least one, during the season this year, and I love hearing from Judy because she's got a witty sense of humor and a fun British accent. Judy, I hope you laugh at my American accent as much as I smile at your British accent. It makes me, hearing your quips about the things that we talk about on the show from a perspective of somebody in Great Britain is always a funny thing for me to hear. So let's hear what Judy has to say today.
Hi Jake, or should I say Jacobo. This is Judy Dawson again. Boomer moment, not sure if this is the right Flipgrid to leave a message for the final show of this season. Season 3 was fab. I loved it, every minute of it. Humour moments that I find funny. Not really sure because obviously I'm British. I don't even know what a chili dog is, but must say I did laugh out loud at the improv EdCon thing with the flatulence. Definitely made me laugh. Using takeaways, everything. I've tried everything. TIMTWODI, man, just do it. I try it. If it works, I carry on using it. If it doesn't, then I don't. Things that I have managed to use from the show, pretty much everything. I had never used Flipgrid. I had never used Pear Deck. I had never used Mentimeter. I had never used Edgy or Actively Learn. Every little thing, Whiteboard FI, every little thing you have mentioned, I have used and loved. Probably I need to stop adding new things now because it freaks the 7-year-olds out. But they have done a fantastic job. My biggest achievement from the show is that I managed to give a PD at school about Pear Deck and Mentimeter and Flipgrid. And we even added the Finish the Squiggle at the end of the PD. And it's also Finish the Squiggle is something that kids really love. Time is running out and I love your show, Jake. Thanks ever so much, Jake. You are brill. Thanks again. Bye for now.
I just love getting messages from Judy. Judy, you are a ray of sunshine. I love hearing these messages from you. You are witty and fun, but also so positive about what you're doing and what you're learning to do and what you're adding into your practice as an educator. I just think that's so rad. I love hearing that. I should point out, you are missing out on chili dogs. Listen, Judy, you already said in that message that I'm Brill. Your words, not mine. Thank you for that, by the way. So now you know that you have to trust me. So go find yourself a chili dog. Here's how, if you can't find a place there that makes chili dogs, just take some chili, preferably without beans and preferably a little bit sweet. Chili's a little bit sweet, I think, is ideal in my book, and plop it on top of a hot dog. Judy's like, we have neither of those things here. And hopefully you can find the hot dog and chili, and you've got enough chili to also put it on top of some French fries. And then that's amazing. And then maybe add some melted cheese to that. Oh, and do you have an antacid handy, Judy? Because you're also going to need that with it. Seriously, though, Judy, that professional development you mentioned sounds brill. As you said, I love hearing about that. Also, your birds in the background are amazing. I love hearing them chirp as you talk. And also, I should point out that Judy, true TIMTWODI here, shared 2 different messages, one on Flipgrid and one on SpeakPipe, because there's more than one way to leave a message for the show, right? See what I did there, Judy, with TIMTWODI? And shared on one and the other, just in case one didn't work. And so they were both so great that I actually put some stuff from one into some stuff from the other one. So that was kind of 2 messages melded together into one. I hope it didn't sound like 2 separate messages. I hope it sounded like one. Otherwise, I'm not as good of an editor as I thought I was. I should also point out I'm bearing the lead here a little bit. That does not mean that Judy gets entered to win the prize for today's episode twice. I didn't mention during this episode, but when I first announced this back in the spring, I said anybody who leaves a message that gets used in this finale episode will be entered to win a free signed copy of my book when it comes out. I thought it would have been out a long time ago, but it should be out in the next week or so, and I will send it to one of these people. So far we already heard Mark and Jay and Judy, and so they're all entered in there to win. I'd like to give Judy a bonus chance for recording 2 different messages and calling me Brill and all of the nice stuff she said about the show. But Judy, rules are rules. You only get 1 entry, and if you lose, you don't get a book, but I will send you a chili dog in the mail. I'm not sure how it'll stay on that trip, but I do hope that you enjoy it. All right. Speaking of enjoy it, let's switch gears over to another message that I enjoyed. Here's a friend of the show, Tina Glanski.
Jake, this is Tina Glanski. My favorite soapbox moment was your episode with Dr. Monica Burns when you talked about things that don't go as planned. This happens so frequently as a regular ed teacher. I teach social studies, and I try new things, and oftentimes it's a struggle, but I keep going forward, like you said. And I also tried your Pear deck Squiggle, and the kids asked for it over and over again. Thanks for all your suggestions. I'm a long-time listener, and you keep me going. You have kept me going this entire year. Thank you.
Tina, thank you so much for that. Messages like that keep me going. So I'm honored to hear that what I was sharing on the podcast for the season kept you going, but those messages keep me going. It could be hard, to be honest, to stay motivated to do this in the evenings and on the weekends and in the summertime, as I'm doing right now, along with what I do in my own classroom. But these messages like this one from Tina, remind me why I do it. So thank you so much for that, Tina. And the rest of you out there listening, if you feel similarly, or if you have something else like that you would like to share, remember that you could do so as well at the Flipgrid page for the show, which is at flipgrid.com/EduDuctTape. Or I think also EduDuctTape.com/Flipgrid. I don't know. It's in the show notes. And SpeakPipe.com/EduDuctTape. Again, in the show notes. I'd love to hear it. Like I said, those things keep me going. Just like in our classroom, that sometimes it can be difficult teaching day in and day out, but when a kid, smiles or says thank you or learns something or is proud of their learning or says something went well or said they enjoyed something, those are the things that really push you forward. Messages like those also push me forward as a podcaster. So thank you, Tina. Before our next Duct Taper message, I do want to give a little sneak peek into the book, into Educational Duct Tape and EdTech Integration Mindset. It is coming very, very soon. Again, I said I don't quite know when, but it's coming soon, and I want to share some sneak peeks with you today because you're my duct taper buddies and you deserve to know. So last week, or the last episode, the first part of the season 3 finale, where I shared some takeaways from all of our guests this season, I gave you a few sneak peeks. I told you the title and the topic of chapter 1. I also told you about the educational duct tape questions that I asked and answered in chapters 2 through 4. So let's continue the sneak peeks now with chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the book is titled PJ Pants, Tater Tots, and Doctor's Offices. And thanks to my friend Dan Stitzel, by the way, I learned that I have to put a comma after tots because Oxford commas are important, you know? So PJ Pants, Tater Tots, and Doctor's Offices. Some of you guys might know these stories, might know what the PJ Pants refers to, might know what the Tater Tots refers to, and might also know what the Doctor's Office refers to. But this is kind of the origin story of educational duct tape. It's also the origin story of the edu gifts that I make and share on my website and on Twitter. You can go back to season 1 and a few different episodes and hear about it. You could also tune into some of those PDs that are recorded and online, and in certain ones I tell these stories. Or you could just wait and grab your copy of the book and read chapter 2. I think it's a fun one. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. And I like being able to expand on it in word form rather than speaking form. It was kind of fun to wordsmith this out and share these stories in a slightly different way about the PJ Pants and the Tater Tots and the Doctor's Office and the origin of those gifts and the origin of the idea of educational duct tape. By the way, I also, for this show or for the book, have a series of sketch notes that I've been releasing periodically. They were made by friend of the show, former guest on the show, and upcoming guest on the show, hint, hint, in a special episode, Jen Giffen. I worked with Jen. I approached Jen about making some sketch notes for the book. She did some amazing sketch notes. I love her style. And she did one sketch note per chapter of the book. So I will link that chapter 2 sketch note into the show notes. You can also see them as I release them. You'll be the first person to see them if you sign up for my newsletter. Anything that I preview on the book goes first to those newsletter subscribers before they go to anybody else. So if you make sure you're on the newsletter, anything for the book or pretty much anything I do on social media too, I share with them first. That's a little perk of being a newsletter subscriber is you get to see things first before you see them on my Twitter or my Instagram or my Pinterest or my TikTok maybe soon or Facebook. That all happens first in the newsletter. That's generally the first place things come out. And that sketch note showing the story of PJ Pants, Tater Tots, and Doctor's Offices is linked in the show notes, but also came out to the people who are newsletter subscribers. All right, let's get back to what was shared by the Duct Tapers with some words from a friend of the show, Carmen Tatum, who had a lot to share and a lot she was excited about. And I think you'll want to listen because it might give you some pointers on some things that you want to go back and check out. Take it away, Carmen.
Hi, my name is Carmen Tatum, and I would love to share a couple of my favorite episodes that inspired me to adapt lessons within my classroom immediately. Jake, you did ask for us to share a favorite moment or idea within the last season. However, I just discovered your podcast within the /share, and so I've listened to almost all the episodes by now. So as far as I'm concerned, they're all kind of from this season. Anyways, one of the first ones that I wanted to mention was from episode 29, with Jon Corippo. And in this episode, he had a lot of great information about formative assessment tools, but he also talked about something called the nacho paragraph. And I really loved this idea. And another teacher at my school and I both tried it with our students, and they really, really enjoyed it. In fact, they keep asking if I could do that again with them. The other episode that I would like to mention was episode 48 with Mike Abrams, who discussed media literacy, bias, and perspective. This was so timely for me because I was just about to teach a lesson on writing utilizing outside sources. In this episode, Mike talks about the important task of helping students learn how to scrutinize their sources to see if they are valid or reliable. He shares some great deceiving websites designed to trick you into believing what you read was accurate. Some examples include the tree octopus, dihydrogen monoxide, and Dog Island. After listening to this episode, I created a slide deck to present to my class on the topic of scrutinizing websites. On the final slide, I had a shared activity for them so that they could click on all these different websites, and they worked together to determine if the website was real or fake. Since I did this at the beginning of the school year, I felt that my students showed some great media literacy skills for the rest of the year. Thank you so much for taking the time to make such a great podcast, Jake. And I hope that everyone's summer is less torturous than the summer of 2020.
Oh, Carmen, less torturous than the summer of 2020. Indeed. That is an understatement. And I love the use of less torturous there, by the way. Bonus points for that. Not an extra entry to win a free copy of the book, but you do get bonus points in my book for that awesome reference in there. You also get some points for referencing one of my favorite earlier episodes of the podcast, which was the one with Jon Corippo, where he talked about a couple of different edu protocols. And he also talked about a whole lot of things, because Jon Corippo is a crazy man and he shares a lot of stuff and he's a lot of fun to listen to and talk to. But yeah, lots of stuff, lots of laughs. That was a fun one. But yes, nacho paragraphs, great idea. And you know what, Carmen, you brought this back into my mind, and I think I might try this out this year in my science classrooms when we practice writing the standardized response or the standardized test response questions. So when a kid writes an extended response, I've found that always over my years that it's more effective to then have the students give feedback and grade them and things like that, so that they really get into the mind of what an assessor is looking for in that situation. And I think maybe using nacho paragraph for that might be really cool. Now, I should say, I am not a big fan of standardized tests. I bet Jon Corippo is not either, but we do want to develop those skills in our students. Unfortunately, it's just part of our job, and I'm not going to be the podcaster that says you shouldn't worry about it, because obviously it's part of your job. I understand you're worried about it. So I think I'm going to try that out. Have kids respond to a test question that they might see on the science test for me, and then put up one of those responses as a nacho paragraph and go through it as a class. I really like it. It wasn't your idea directly, Carmen, but that's how the Adjacent Possible works, right? Speaking of Adjacent Possible, Carmen also shared about an episode with another piece of my Adjacent Possible, who is Mike Abrams, because I met and was introduced to Mike's work through the podcast. Mike has been a listener to the podcast, and we've talked off and on throughout the last few years through him being a duct taper. And then Mike was on the show this year to talk about media literacy and bias and perspective. He shared some really great things. And I love, Carmen, the way that you use that early on in the year to have students explore those websites, and then talked about it throughout the year. It became a recurring discussion. I bet that was really powerful for your students to revisit that idea throughout the school year. Really, really cool, Carmen. Thank you for sharing that. I wish you were sharing some of John's nachos that he talked about in his episode, but indeed no nachos right now. Although I will be going to dinner soon, so who knows? Maybe I'll pick a place with nachos. We'll see. Speaking of nachos, not really, but I bet our next listener would like some nachos too. This is Sue Brennan. And Sue, I don't know if you like nachos, but if you do, I think you've earned some for listening to the show and for submitting this feedback. Let's hear what Sue has to say.
Hey, Jake. It's Susan Brennan here. I stumbled across your podcast recently. I'm out on sabbatical. I am a middle school teacher for the Pennsbury School District in southeastern PA. But I stumbled across the podcast while doing some therapeutic painting in my own home. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I feel like, where have you been all my life? I listened to the episode with Joe Marquez, I believe it was, on UDL. And I feel it is so much what I need to keep me going for another 3 years. As I said, I teach middle school, and I've been doing it for 32 years in the same district, and I love the district and the people that I work with, but I'm feeling a little bit stuck. I stumbled across this podcast, and that inspect, collect, redirect, all the little tips and tricks you guys gave, I think will just be enough to keep me going. I feel like when I started teaching 32 years ago, under the guidance of Madeline Hunter, teaching was just so much different. I feel like it was more about the teacher. And this is really hard for me because now teaching is really what it should be. It's about the learner. But to
So I think that Susan hit the time limit there in Flipgrid. I guess I should have increased that amount of time. There was an oversight on my end there. So sorry about that, Susan. But I actually don't think it matters because I think your response was phenomenal. I'm so glad that the show was stumble-worthy for you. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it during that therapeutic painting time. I'm so glad that you're finding it valuable in your work you're setting forth to do this coming school year as a middle school teacher. And to be honest, I'm inspired by your experience and your tale. The growth and reflection passion that you're showing there is powerful. And I hope that lots of educators are hearing this or hearing what you're saying, because that feeling of being stuck is natural and it's understandable. I'm going into, I think, my 19th year in working in a school. I think it's 19. I'm really not sure. And I have felt that myself multiple times. And I think every educator does at certain points, sometimes to different levels than others. But it's natural. It's understandable. And I love that, Susan, that you're modeling that you are taking steps to keep going, to kind of rekindle that fire and to get even better at what you do for your students. I'm sure you've always been a wonderful educator, but you're taking steps to get even better for them as the classroom changes. And as you said there, your philosophy about teaching and where the focus is has changed. And now you're looking at, as you said, going from being really teacher focused on what you did to now not only flipping the tables and being student focused, but that you were referencing the Joe Marquez episode where Joe and I talked about UDL. I mean, how student focused can you get? Then UDL, Universal Design for Learning. For the rest of you, if you haven't listened to that episode, I'll put that episode link in the show notes so you can check it out. But Susan, thank you so much for this message. It really meant a lot to me. Okay, I think we've got 2 more to go, maybe 3. I'm not really sure. But before we do that, I do want to share another sneak peek from the book. So in the previous episode that I did a couple weeks ago, I shared a couple of the hashtag EduDuctTape questions from the book. So in the book, at the end of almost every chapter, except for the intro and the conclusion chapter, at the end of those chapters, I share an educational duct tape question that a teacher might have, a thing that a teacher might be trying to figure out how to do in their classroom. And I go through a handful of tools, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range, that I think could be the tools that answer that question, that solve that problem. And I cover them each in, less than a page of the book, maybe a half a page, maybe just a couple sentences. It really depends on the complexity of the different tools and how much comparison is necessary. But my goal is that I give you enough information about those tools to decide which one is the right one for you. And actually, first, I'm getting ahead of myself. You have to first decide if you even have that problem or that question, and you need a tool, right? Because if I go over 10 questions in the book, those are too many things for you to do all this coming school year. Maybe 1 or 2 or 3, depending on your style and your how rapidly you learn and integrate new things in your classroom. So you first decide, is this a thing that I need to address? And if so, which one of these tools is good for that? And then once you pick it, on the back end of the book, which is what I call the online resource hub, it's a space online where you can get some resources or share some resources about the different tools that are covered in the book. I have curated a set of videos or guides or tutorials, some from me, some from other educators that will support you in doing that. So if you find the tool that's right for you, if it's a question that you have or a goal that you have, then you can go there and learn how to use it. So I don't give you enough information in the book to be a proficient user of that tool. I give you enough information to choose the tool. And then in the back end of the book, that online resource hub, I'm giving you the information then to learn how to use the tool that you've selected. So in the last episode, I told you about the questions that I addressed in chapters 2, 3, and 4. How about now I tell you about chapters 5, 6, and 7. So in chapter 5, the hashtag EduDuctTape question is, how can I get my students blogging to reflect on their learning? So I go over a set of different blogging tools. This is one of the sections that I had to research the most for this book, because it was a question number one, I had, and number 2, I really wanted to answer for educators, because it's something that's asked of me often. What's the best tool for blogging? And I really haven't known the answer in the past. And I've never really blogged in my classroom. I've had some years I did digital portfolios and things like that. But so blogging was something that I really had to research. So this is a section that I'm particularly proud of, because I really had to do my research to select the tools that are best for you. I had to go in and try them out and get used to them so that I could share that with you. And that's kind of my goal here, is I've done the research for you so that if this is a question you have, you just look at my recommendations, pick which one is best for you based on the information I share. And then, like I said, I'll share some resources on the resource hub that helps you get used to it. So if you're interested in blogging, chapter 5 of the book, I go over a set of different tools you can choose from. There are a lot of options out there, but I think there's kind of some clear lines between them. So I think you'll look and you'll know which one, based on what you see in the book, you want to use, if that's something you want to use. And it might not be, and that's okay too. And in chapter 6, I talk about, the question is, how can I get my students self-assessing? So I have 3 different chapters in the book that talk about formative assessment, because I think there's different versions of formative assessment. in this section, I want to talk about self-assessment. So it's important for us to know which students are succeeding, which students are struggling, what specific standards we need to work on, what specific students need to work on, what standards, and all kinds of stuff like that. It's important for us to know that so that we can make teacher decisions and teacher moves. But it's also important to empower students to do that as well. And by the way, in the book, I reference the work of John Hattie a lot. If you're not familiar with John Hattie, he's a professor down in Australia at University of Melbourne, I believe it is, author of a book called Visible Learning and some other books. Really phenomenal guy. And now there's the whole Visible Learning team. And what they do is they analyze different things in classrooms based on a set of different studies. They do what's called a meta-analysis or meta-synthesis. I forget what the correct scientific name is for it. But they look at a bunch of different studies and they determine the effect size of a certain process. So in the book, I share the effect size of blogging in the classroom. And he doesn't have a specific study that is about blogging, but he has some about reflections and some about technology and writing. And so we can kind of deduce how effective that practice might be in your classroom if you bring it in. And the same goes for self-assessment. So I've got the data in there to help you decide if you really do need to ramp up the self-assessment in your classroom. And I think his research is pretty compelling on that one. But you'll see the tools that I think are good or maybe not so good for self-assessment too. And so I've kind of done the research for you and said, these tools are good for formative assessment, but maybe not as good for self-assessment. These are good for self-assessment. And so in chapter 6, I talk about what those tools are and again, help you maybe make that decision of which one to use if it's one you're interested in. And chapter 7, last one I'll share before we get back to some of the duct taper comments, is one where the educational duct tape question was, how can I leverage screencasting in my classroom? So what tools can I use to record screencasts? And there are a lot of options out there. Years ago, when I started supporting educators with educational technology, there really wasn't very many options to talk about. And now there are a lot. And I had to really narrow it down when I wrote this chapter of the book because I could have talked about 20 different tools, but you don't want to hear about 20 different tools. You want to hear about a handful. You want to hear about them briefly so that you could decide which one is for you. And then you can go to that resource hub and learn how to use that one. So I went over a handful of different screencasting tools. I'm sure you can guess a few of them that are in there, like Screencastify and like Loom and like Screencast-O-Matic. But there are some in there that might surprise you, some that you might not realize did screencasting or might have never heard of. So I go over each of them in a way that will help you make the decision as to which one will work for you if it is something you need. And maybe if you already do screencasting, maybe it'll help you decide if you're using the right one or if you need to make a change. Because you don't have to change just to the new thing just because. You change the new thing if it addresses some problems or goals or things like that that you weren't previously addressing. So that is chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the book. Blogging tools is in chapter 5, along with an anecdote and a story. Chapter 6 is self-assessment, again, along with an anecdote and a story. And chapter 7 is screencasting, again, along with an anecdote and a story. I hope that you'll enjoy all of them. Lots of research, but I think it's going to be very useful for you. I did the research so that you don't have to. Okay, let's go back to our duct tapers now and hear from, who are we going to hear from next, Jake? Who's next? Let me see who's next. It is Lee Tucker at Comic Socks on Twitter. Lee, I don't know why I remember that your Twitter handle is Comic Socks. Actually, I do, because it's Comic Socks. I just can't forget that. But I don't know why it's at Comic Socks. Is it because you really like socks that have comics on them? Or comical socks? Because I also am a sock connoisseur, Lee. So, Lee, I'd like to hear more about that Twitter handle and your Comic Socks. But first, let's hear a little more about what Lee has to share with us today.
Hey Jake, this is Lee Tucker from Villarica, Georgia. So I just wanted to share my probably biggest takeaway from the show. It was actually something that was over a year ago, maybe a year and a half, when you had Jared Cooney Horvath on talking about his book, Stop Talking, Start Influencing. But I picked up the book and read it, and a lot of that and a lot of what he talked about on your show really changed the way that I approached lessons in my class, looking at some of those deeper kind of scientific aspects of learning and looking at how I could best utilize some of that stuff to help my students learn better. So that was my biggest one. And then just kind of on a side note, I've been listening for a year or two now, and it has really pushed me into becoming a better educator, and actually ended up debuting my own podcast a year ago to try to do the same for other teachers. So I appreciate all the work and encouragement that you put out there for teachers. Hope you're doing well.
So, Lee, first of all, thank you for that message. And second of all, I just went and subscribed to the 8-Bit Instructor podcast. I did not know you had a podcast. I'm going to check it out. I love the show artwork. It has a 8-bit video game version of Lee on the front of it. I love it. And I love some of the topics I'm seeing in here. It looks like it's going to be great. I'm excited to listen to it. I am noticing, Lee, as I scroll down here, I'm seeing people like Jared Cooney Horvath, who you mentioned, and Carly Mora, who's been on the show before. So I'm seeing some Educational Duct Tape podcast guests on there, Lee. But I'm not seeing myself on there, Lee. And Lee, I would love to be on the 8-Bit Instructor podcast. So give me a call sometime. Let's see. We can talk video games, Lee. I'm in. I could talk about video games with you. But also, I want to talk with you about Jared Cooney Horvath, because that, not technically a season 3 takeaway, Lee, because that was from season 2, I believe. But that is one of the episodes that I hear from hear about people. Hear people mention the most from, the back catalog of the show. People were really affected by what Jared shared in that episode. Jared is a wealth of information. That book is phenomenal. I've heard a lot of people say after they listened to that one, they went out and bought the book and have changed things they do in their classrooms. I've changed things that I do in my classroom. Jared is amazing. That book is amazing. He's got a newer book out, which I haven't read yet, but I need to check out, because his first book, or at least that book, I don't know if it was his first book, but the Stop Talking, Start Influencing, I believe it is. Such a fun read and such a powerful read. And so many people have said, I love that episode and I love that book. So just phenomenal stuff. Okay, we got one last message to share before we sign off. I thought there were two, but one is from friend of the show, Dan Gallagher, who asked a question. And Dan, I'm going to hold on to that one for an upcoming episode and share that one there. It was a Google Sheets question, so I'm excited to answer it. And Dan, I think it might have cut off at the end. So I might be reaching out to have you re-record that or record the end or show me the details for the end so that I can respond to that one in full in an upcoming episode. But I do have one last recording that's a season finale recording, and that is from friend of the show, Les, and we're going to hear Les's tip. He shared a tip about PDFs, which I think is a really cool tip that I think you're going to like. And then after that, I will be sharing with you which one of these wonderful duct tapers who shared a tip or an insight or a takeaway or something like that today is winning a free signed copy of the Educational Duct Taper book. Why am I saying duct taper book? They're duct tapers. The book's, I've spent so much time on this book. How could I say the wrong name for it? It's not Educational Duct Taper. It's Educational Duct Tape. Oh, guys, I'm losing it. But yes, one of these people is winning a free copy of it. I will spin the wheel after Les's message. And then after that wheel is spun, I will be sharing the season 3 Giggle Mix, which is a lot of fun. And I think you're going to enjoy it. But speaking of enjoy it, I think you're going to like this tip from Les. Let's check it out.
Hello, Educational Duct Tapers. My name is Lester Dinerstein, and my tip, and I'm going for the Captain Obvious title. I like to save PDFs. I'll take a file, and there are certain pages that I want put together. But I've noticed that all I have to do under the print feature is to save as a PDF, and then I can choose my pages to save. And suddenly I've taken this large file and now I've condensed it down into a few pages, which is quite helpful when you receive those PDFs and you only want page 1, 4, 7, and then it's saved for you. And I really wish I would have thought of that a lot sooner, but you know what? That's the fun thing about education. You figure it out as you go, and sometimes you have a little bit of brilliance. So this may be something that you guys know, so go ahead and file it under Captain Obvious. Thank you for your time, but if that helps one person out there, I'll be happy. All right, take care.
All right, Les, thank you for that. Speaking of meeting people in Philadelphia at ISTE, like I said for Jay earlier, also got to have lunch with Les and some other friends there. Who was at lunch? It was me and Les and Michael Wesley and Nairi Clark, 3 awesome educators. It was a nice little lunch. But anyhow, thank you, Les, for that tip. I agree. It was not a little bit of brilliance, as you said at the end there, Les. It was a lot of brilliance. It is a great technique. I don't remember when I discovered it, but it also was a very similar light bulb moment for me. I was like, look what I could do. You people look for these great PDF tools. How do I take pages out of a PDF? How do I combine PDFs? And this tool for taking pages out or creating PDFs that have less pages in them. This is a great technique. Thank you so much, Les, for sharing that one. Okay, that is it for the season finale shares. We had people sharing things that made them laugh, people sharing tech tools they used and successes they had and soapbox moments they loved and tips that they have, all kinds of stuff relating to this season from the show. I really appreciate these people for sharing. Even though this finale episode is coming to a close here, that doesn't mean your opportunities to share are coming to a close. I love to feature things from the duct tapers, from the listeners at the end of the episodes. So please do reach out and share things as the season goes on. The links are in the show notes. You could record them now and they'll get in my queue, and I try to fit at least one into every episode. And if you don't like, recording your voice or on Flipgrid with the video, and you'd rather actually just, send me text, that's great too. Please feel free to go ahead and do that. And I share things like iTunes reviews I'm going to call it iTunes anymore, Apple Podcast reviews and tweets and emails. So please do feel free to share away, and I will share them throughout the season. And keep in mind that at the end of season 4, which is starting here very soon, at the end of the season, I plan to do a similar episode. So keep this in the back of your mind that we'll do something similar at next summer, and you could share then. Okay, but now I need to give away a prize to one of these wonderful people. So Jay and Lee and Les and Mark and Judy and Tina and Carmen and Susan and, did I say Lee? And Lee, I think I said Lee. He's only in the list once though. All shared some wonderful things. So one of them is winning a free signed copy of my book, Educational Duct Tape, when it comes out. Might be out by the time you're listening to this, might not, but one of these people is winning it. So I've got wheelofnames.com open here. I've got those names typed in there, and I'm going to click spin. Here it goes. You might not hear it clicking because I have headphones plugged in, but trust me, I'm spinning. Here it goes. It's spinning. And our first winner is Lee Tucker. Lee, congratulations. I will be looking for an email from you with an address so I could send you that copy of that book. And you know what? That was fun. I enjoyed that. So I'm going to remove Lee from the Wheel of Names. Lee will get his copy of the book, and I want to give somebody else a copy of the book. So I've got my Wheel of Names here with one less person in there, and I'm going to now spin it. So Lee is getting a copy, and the other person getting a copy is, it's spinning. Mark Gasaway. So Mark, send me that address as well, and a copy will be in the mail coming your way. The rest of you, you've got two options. One is to head over to Amazon when the book does come out and grab a purchase. And a second one is I am going to do more giveaways throughout this season. So keep listening and paying attention to following along, and you might find another chance to win a giveaway. And you know what? To be honest, if you happen to buy a copy and then you win a copy, you could pick somebody else to send it to so that they get it, and you can keep your own original purchased copy. But either way, can't wait to get it out there. Can't wait to get it in your hands. Mark and Lee, congratulations. Can't wait to send those your way. That does it for the main part of this finale episode. Now we've got to move on to something I'm very excited to share with you, which is this season 3 Giggle Mix. This is all of my favorite things from this season that made me giggle, put to music. And yes, not just any music, but the Educational Duct Tape theme song music, which is a song called Great Hope by a band called something or another. I forget what they're called. Hold on, let me look them up. It is from the YouTube audio library, and I was looking for music that said technology and said fun at the same time. And this was a song I ended up with 3 years ago. Great Hope by Vibe Mountain. So if you're from Vibe Mountain, thank you for this song, and I hope you enjoy it. Put to weird things from this past season of the podcast. We will ride out into the sunset of this season on this Giggle Mix, and I will be back in your earbuds, hopefully within the week, with a couple of special episodes I have up my sleeve for you guys. I can't wait for you to hear them. They are recorded and ready to go. I just got to edit them and get them ready to come out to you. So hopefully I'll have one to you very, very soon. As always, as a parent, I'm grateful for you guys. As an educator, I am so proud of what you do as lifelong learners for the benefit of your students. Thanks, guys. Here we go with the Giggle Mix.
In 4th grade, my teacher called me Motor Mouth.
My 5th grade teacher called me Megaphone Mouth.
Oh, no way, really? People would be fired for that now.
Right. You were Motor Mouth, and I was Megaphone Mouth.
And
I just had to pause recording with Dee for a second to play the, I don't even know the mediator in a children fight. So there are 3 kids in the Miller household. I've been away from them now for 12 minutes to record with Dee, and one of them comes up as Dee's talking, and I have to hold up the finger. This is the Zoom finger. I have to hold up the Zoom finger for 5 minutes of Dee talking. Hold on, hold the heck on. Okay, give me a second here. The remedy is Beckett, you're making this really hard for me to record right now. My 6-year-old son is in the room with me right now building Legos, and as I talk, he's lip syncing to my voice. So I have to look at my voice that's supposedly coming out of the mouth of a 6-year-old talking about workshops and things like that. You're killing me, kid. How did you end up being a chauffeur for Al Franken?
So I was only a chauffeur for a day.
Okay.
So not a long time chauffeur. I got lost and he still tipped me. What a guy. Tipped me $20.
Nice.
And I got lost and made him late for his book presentation. Oh.
I have 4 kids. And my kids, yeah.
Why are you trying to one-up me with 4 kids instead of 3 kids? You got it harder.
I wasn't. I was not trying to one-up you. You can have one of mine. Just kidding.
No, that's okay.
Get in. I love my kids.
It was either that or sing Hangin' Tough on the air, and I'm not going to do that.
Well, next karaoke, next conference.
Next conference, karaoke, Hangin' Tough. No, I will not. Now here's a good question for you. If you could make an EdTech New Kids on the Block for a karaoke performance, who would be your 5 members of the EdTech NKOTB performance?
Well,
Putting on the spot here.
That is
I just got a note.
The kids, man. The kids.
Dee, I'm going to show you the note I just got.
Yes. I'm bleeding.
Got a cut on her ankle. It is the wimpiest looking cut I've ever seen. Oh, honey. So
put some duct tape on it.
Put some duct tape on it. Daddy will be done in a couple minutes, but you know where the paper towels and the Band-Aids are, and I'll help you with it in a second, okay? I'll be up in 5 minutes. Dee, I've got to leave that in because that's just COVID life.
That's just classic.
Yeah.
Oh.
Listen, wastoid, there's more than one way to peg your jeans.
Yeah.
So I do get to see the coaching aspect where I go to other schools and support those teachers.
Kasey, are you getting pulled over right now while we're talking right now?
No, I live in the heart of Atlanta, so yeah.
You hear that regularly?
Yeah.
No, when my wife met me 15 years ago or whatever it was, I was not talking about educational technology at all. We were not at the bar have you ever heard of Flipgrid?
Nope.
He thought he was going to be a trophy husband, and he got an educator, huh?
I had something else for him.
You broke that news to him, and he's like, what?
Yep.
I thought you were going to work for Goldman Sachs or something to bring in all the money. No, okay.
I'm gonna give you a red pen and ask you to help me grade these papers. That's what I'm going to do.
Yes.
And it helps that they're softer apples, not the harder ones. And there's a little more challenging and a little smaller too. So.
Okay, you're even an apple juggling connoisseur. You know which apples are best for juggling. Claudio, I can juggle one apple and take a bite out of it.
Yeah.
That's true. You actually were on Judge Judy?
Absolutely. And I would say that I challenge anybody listening to find that video, because you will not be able to find it. But yes, I was on an episode of Judge Judy.
Oh gosh. Are you going to give us some details, or can you not share this part?
Well, no, I can. Yeah. I mean, you know what happens when you're in college. You meet a girl, you move in with a girl, you buy a girl a washer and dryer, and you break up and she sells them. And then you say, I want my money from those washers and dryers. So that's basically it.
You're underestimating the Boolean search skills of Boolean search skills of our listeners, Joe. I used to love that show. Yes. That was like the highlight of, what was that called? TGIF, right?
Yes,
remember?
It was.
Right?
Yes.
What was it? Step by step, and
there was some show about some dinosaurs, like little
yeah,
dinosaurs.
not the mama, whatever that show was called. And I might send them an edible arrangement.
Delicious.
Delicious. Looks like flowers, tastes like pineapples. You know, I've never had an edible arrangement, though.
You have not?
No, I've had fruit before, but never fruit that looks like flowers. Oh,
it's
cool.
Kind of a neat competitive game where you're trying to harvest higher level elements from stars.
Oh, that sounds cool. I feel like you need to be playing Blue Kit, Eric. Have you played Blue Kit yet?
No. Oh, no. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yes.
Yeah, Blue Kit.
That's how it's pronounced. Yeah, okay. Yes, I do know what it is. I just don't talk to other humans. So I never hear words spoken. I speak to houseplants. Yes, I do play. I have played on that website now that I know how it is pronounced.
And I was like, help Desiree or go get a burrito. And I'm sorry, Desiree, I picked burrito over you.
And even just hanging out with them, like I would have chosen that. Like, hey, they wanted to go hang out by the trash cans. I would have chosen that because they are amazing people. So I'm okay with that.
You're good with my priorities then, okay?
Yes, I am.
That's what you always hope for in a good interview, is that the other person talks long enough that you could take a sip while they're doing that. Today, our question comes to us from my son, Beckett, my 7-year-old son, Beckett. Are you ready for it?
Yes. I was trying to take a drink.
I film all of my videos and host my weekly live show in an unfinished shed in the woods without insulation or sheetrocked walls, and up until recently, only an extension cord for electricity.
Okay.
I would say hippopotamus's feet.
Okay.
Because I could still have a human head.
Is this the first interview you've done where you've had to say, I'm going to pick to have a human head?
I'm going to pick the human head, sir. It is.
I would like the human head for 500, Alex. No.
When I was a teacher, I loved 7th grade. I used to call it like the gateway math, right? Because
Meredith, can I speak to you after class?
Yes, sir, Mr. Miller.
Okay, bye students, bye everybody. Meredith, the reason I wanted to call you in, I think you might already know, is about something called flatulence. Do you know what flatulence is?
No, sir, I don't know that word.
You might more commonly refer to it as farting.
Well, you know, sometimes if I get my fanny pack on a little too tight, it just, I don't know what to do. Things just happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Miller.